While I may conduct a review of Amazing Spider-Man 2 in the future, for now I want to deal with some points about the film that many have raised, including from those who I know personally who shall remain anonymous. A brief overview of Amazing Spider-Man 2 that I have is that I do consider it one of the best films I've seen, close to rivaling Captain America the Winter Soldier and The Dark Knight as great films. Religious film-wise, this would include The Miracle Maker and The Prince of Egypt, which are good films too. I hope, if the Lord wills, I can give a reason why I consider Amazing Spider-Man 2 to be such an enjoyable movie. AM2, as I am calling it for the sake of this video, to make it easier on me, has garnered a mixed reception among audiences, and many people have compared it to Spider-Man 3, which has also received a mixed reception. While I don't consider Spider-Man 3 to be the worst movie ever, I do see the problems with the film and admit after 7 years it's not as good as it could have been, and it is somewhat entertaining on a superficial level. But seriously, it is not the worst movie ever made, people. I'm looking at you, Lemony Snicket's Grown-Ups and Transformers Dark of the Moon. And of course Revenge of the Fallen comes pretty close. Most of the comparisons between Spider-Man 3 and Amazing Spider-Man 2 have been mostly superficial nitpicks, with one comparison being valid, but with the rest having no substantive marks against AM2. Firstly, let's deal with the villains. Spider-Man 3 had New Goblin, Sandman and Venom, whereas AM2 had Electro, Green Goblin and Rhino. Regarding Alexei Sitsevich, the Rhino, he barely qualifies as a villain by virtue of the fact that he's merely a cameo at the beginning and the end of the film. Sitsevich doesn't become the Rhino until the end of the film, and it was set up for the rest of the Spider-Man cinematic universe. Venom himself had more screen time as Eddie Brock, and as his alter ego. Thus Venom counts as one villain, not merely a teaser. And even then, Eddie Brock was for the most part, a jerk. This means that AM2 has only 2 villains with major impact on the plot, while Spider-Man 3 has 3 villains. Apples and oranges, folks. Next, Harry Osborn doesn't even become the Green Goblin until 1 hour, 29 minutes and 54 seconds into the film. Yes, I'm a bit sad for counting that far into the film, but basically Harry, for the most part, in the film is a tragic character, and only becomes the villain as a last resort due to Spider-Man letting him down, which Spidey never intended to do. Harry Osborn in Spider-Man 3 was already established as a threat and a villain near the beginning of the film, and for the most part of Spider-Man 3 suffered from amnesia and was recovering from a bomb injury, but I admit the creators really didn't focus too much on Harry in this film, and did stick him off to the side while focusing on Sandman, and then doing it again with Sandman being pushed to the side to focus on Harry. Raimi Harry developed as a villain over the course of 2 movies, whereas Webb Harry became a villain in 1 movie, albeit his circumstances for becoming the villain were different from Raimi Harry. The circumstances in which the 2 Harrys became their goblin alter egos were different. Raimi Harry blames Spider-Man for taking his father's life, whereas Webb Harry blames Spider-Man for taking his hope of a cure away from him. This may not be the comparison that people draw, but nevertheless it removes the idea that somehow there is remotely this absurd idea that the 2 goblins are the same. Now on to Electro. Yes, Electro was pushed to the side, but that had everything to do with the story itself. Why? Because Harry discovers a video and seeks to use Electro to get back into Oscorp so he can get the Spider Serum and heal himself from his retroactive hyperplasia, a disease that's slowly deforming his body and killing him. Electro and Harry are both focused on for the final act of the film when they both invade Oscorp, and while Harry is somewhat incapacitated for a time, you at least had Electro bring the city to its knees by taking away their power and having all of New York at his mercy as a result. Sandman, when he was decommissioned, doesn't do anything after he reforms his body, and doesn't reappear again until you see Venom swinging in the night. Then the 2 take action. It is possible that Venom was familiar with Sandman, and what he could do and use him. But it can be debated as to whether he is actively searching for Sandman, or just happened to bump into Sandman and get the idea then. It can also be debated whether or not Venom and Sandman teaming up makes sense in the context of the plot, But Harry and Electro teaming up is not in dispute. Yes, they both want Spider-Man, but Harry strikes a deal. Electro gets him into Oscorp, and Harry will allow Electro to have the grid he designed in exchange, and kill Spider-Man in the process. Venom and Spider-Man's team-up has shaky ground and a shaky foundation, whereas Electro and Harry's foundation is rock solid. Another claim is Harry being rushed as a villain. Wrong. He wasn't. He doesn't even become a villain until late in the film, and he had every reason to become the villain without being rushed. Firstly, he treats his employees like dirt because of the anger he has towards his father for the way he was treated. His father was a jerk towards him, and thus Harry took it out on them. Towards Peter he is friendly, and it's only when Spider-Man turns him down, Felicia telling him of the spider venom, and his subordinates kicking him out of Oscorp, does he resort to villainy, and it was plot-related, not merely shoehorned into the plot to have the Gwen Stacy death scene recreated. Plus, his motivation for becoming the villain in the first place was because he believed Spider-Man took away his hope, his chance of survival, something that many people overlook in the film. To go back to Electro and Sandman, they have often been compared to each other, also in a negative light, mainly another Spider-Man 3 comparison. However, the circumstances for them being villains are different. In Spider-Man 3, Sandman didn't want to be a villain. He only became a criminal out of desperation to save his daughter from whatever ailment she was dying in the film. He only fought Spider-Man out of reluctance, because of Spider-Man getting in the way, and at the end of the film may have decided to kill Spider-Man through Venom's coercion, just so he wouldn't have any outside interference. It could have been out of revenge on Spider-Man for the incident in the sewers, but a different reason from Electro for having his revenge. In the context of AM2, Electro is established at the beginning of the film as a nobody whom the world never pays attention to, and even his colleagues at work don't take him seriously, and Spider-Man speaking to him is so overwhelming that he does become overly obsessed with Spider-Man. Due to what takes place in the town square after his transformation, Electro wrongly assumes that Spider-Man set him up, and tries to kill him. Electro just simply wanted to be seen and noticed, and because of one mishap, he then has the attitude of to hell with it, and pretty much becomes a psychopath. The only comparison that exists with Electro and Sandman is that they are one-dimensional, and that's it. So what? How are these two even remotely the same? Apples and oranges, different circumstances. The next comparison is a supposed quote-unquote emo Peter being in both films. Let me say this. Tobey Maguire doing a Saturday Night Fever strut in the middle of New York, acting completely stupid in the club, pinning Eddie Brock against the wall, chucking a grenade at Harry Osborn, and having a haircut that doesn't suit him, is not the same as Andrew Garfield making painful decisions or reacting a certain way to some of the revelations, be they true or false, that he has received. So what? Both Spider-Men cry. What's the point? Once again, apples and oranges. And yes, Tobey Maguire's Spider-Man did cry at certain points in the film, because of Mary Jane splitting up with him, and because of Harry Osborn dying. Men are not wimps for crying. That is an absurd idea. Now, if they were cutting themselves over grazing their knee, then you would call them wimps. If they were simply going, "Mummy, I've got a boo-boo on my hand," then you can call them wimps at their age. When Maguire and Garfield's Spider-Men cry after grazing their knees or both dance to Boogie Nights in a ridiculous fashion with an emo-style haircut, then we can talk about an emo Spider-Man being in both films, or even both franchises. The only valid comparison which makes sense is the plot being a bit overstuffed with many things. Though to be fair, with AM2, it paid off in the end. Though I do wish they did resolve the whole Aunt May struggling without Ben plotline. Unless Kurtzman and Orky want to carry this over into another film. Namely, this being a reoccurring theme, and then finally resolved in one of the final films. But that's conjecture. Plus also Orky and Kurtzman are no longer writing together in films. With other projects, yes, but not with film projects. But anyway, putting that aside, what I am saying about the Aunt May plotline is pure conjecture. And regarding Spider-Man 3, Gwen Stacy did not need to be there and was only shoehorned into the film to have a love triangle. And sadly, this issue is never resolved, meaning you don't see Mary Jane and Gwen having a proper reconciliation with each other. You just have a "I'm sorry," and then Gwen Stacy goes away for the rest of the film. The ending of Spider-Man 3 was certainly rushed. These movies did have a lot of stuff packed into them, but AM2, I feel, had a much better payoff. If you don't like AM2, that's fine, each to his own, same with Spider-Man 3. I wanted to get this off my chest, mainly because it is tiresome to hear people drag AM2 through the mud and beat it over the head with Spider-Man 3. I'm not saying you have to like the movie. If you were disappointed with AM2, I'm sorry to hear that, and I hope the next film will not disappoint you. Though to be honest here, even though I like AM2, I really don't have a hope for the Spider-Man cinematic universe being acclaimed through and through, considering the filmmakers are rushing into this. But only time will tell. That's all I have to say on this whole issue, and if the Lord wills, I hope to do a review of AM2 and give my reasons why I think it's such a masterpiece. And yes, I'm happy to go over the cons of the film. Just on a side note as well, here's a question to all those who use Spider-Man 3 as a weapon. With respect to one specific objection, the too many villains thing, I want to ask you a question. How many villains did The Dark Knight have? 3. Maroni, the Joker, and Harvey Dent. 3 villains, by the way. It must be like Spider-Man 3! If you're going to use Spider-Man 3 to beat AM2 over the head with, at least give a constructive criticism and not just simply point out mere similarities, which are at best superficial. Give an actual reason why you don't like the film. This is one reason why I have respect for Sam's channel, considering the fact that he himself has given his reasons for why he felt AM2 fell short of greatness. I am fine with you criticizing the writing, the CGI, the music, etc. That I'm also fine with, each to his own. You're free to criticize a movie or praise a movie. Every man is within his right to do that. But please, give a constructive criticism of the film rather than just saying, I don't like it. This isn't to put anyone down, this is just simply making a point. Thank you for taking the time to watch.